might not see the outcomes, we might see the clues, but when you plant a seed, it's gotta grow before it blooms. Oh.
Aloha. Part 2, Resilient Farmer Drew, Sacred Herbs and Botanicals. Hopefully you're able to catch part 1 of this spookity wookity droopity mushroom. The Halloween spirit, you know. So we're gonna go ahead and get right into it. Research this past August at the University of Florida basically identified a small Y3 protein. It's very potent, they found out, in killing more than 90% of leukemia cells during their test. This is pretty significant, as you know, acute lymphoblastic leukemia is an aggressive blood disorder that is, you know, known to recur and offers poor long-term treatment for most patients. That said, this mushroom basically produces a cascading effect of enzymes that kills off leukemia cells. You know, thinking about this in the larger picture of fungi in general, they create this massive underground mycelium network, creating pathways and connections and symbiosis. You know, likewise, they develop connections beneficial to the mammalian or human organism. And there's something inherently encoded in their genomes that interact with disease cells, and we can expand this to the environment as well, as they are very healing and regenerative, right? We're just in our infancy of understanding about fungi, as only 5% of the world's fungi is known. Now, there are a lot of medicinal qualities of fungi, and this one is really antioxidant, anti-cancerous, which we'll talk about, hepatoprotective for the liver, acetylcholine esterase inhibitor, and anti-inflammatory, anti-diabetic, also antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral, and anti-nematodal, which it works in the soil. There was a study in 2011, Nestle and I forget the other authors. They found that Coprinus comatus as a natural anti-androgenic modulator, and that could serve in the treatment of prostate diseases. Essentially, it inhibits androgen receptors and prostate cancer cells from proliferating. You think about this concept of doctrine of signatures. You know, like most signatures, they act as a mnemonic aid. You know, and here we see some semblance, like with most mushrooms, being, you know, of a phallic symbol, you know, and that corresponds to male sexuality. You know, a plant signature, its properties, characteristics, and behaviors can inform us of its relationship with, you know, planetary forces and vice versa. This correspondence can be perceived by how bodily constitutions are not just understood but influenced by archetypal forces, and provides insight into how we can approach different constitutions and constitutional states in treating conditions and diseases. For example, you might see something that's hot, dry, and in this case we have cold, moist. And it's funny because it's a cold, rainy day today. The color white, as we see here, is analogous to the moon, and the moon associated with the crown chakra, which has an affinity for the brain and the nervous system. Now, acetylcholine deficiency is associated with progressive cognitive impairment and synaptic failure, which we see in Alzheimer's disease, or Alzheimer's. I tend to say Alzheimer's. Shaggy acts as an inhibitor of cholinesterase, which stimulates cholinergic receptors and that increases the availability of acetylcholine in the synaptic cleft, which is the edge of the nerve, and that in turn weakens Alzheimer's symptoms. You know, doctrine of signatures, and we think about the deliquescence, where the structure progressively deteriorates. We can look at that, and we see here the color black, which is indicative of darkness, of mood, death. And in the brain, there's neuritic plaques and neurofibrillary tangles when you have Alzheimer's that are both known to damage and destroy the brain. So there's this duality of day and night, dark and light. And we see it as just breaks down and gives birth. So comparatively, thinking about all this, shaggy mane regenerates the brain. So we look at these scales, and the scales are peeling away layers. We can think about that in the brain as well. But it also is indicative of the changing of the seasons, because it's a short growing season, short grower, which is an indication that winter is coming. So how do you prepare this? The young mushrooms you want to cook before they're actually black or start inking, and you can dehydrate them. There was a 2012 study in chemical ecology, as well as in 2016 environmental science and pollution research, that found shaggy manes absorb heavy metals, and most mushrooms are bioaccumulators. So they have potential use in bioremediation of contaminated soils, and their ability to accumulate mercury and other toxic heavy metals also means that this mushroom growing in these conditions or from disturbed and contaminated soils should not be eaten. So with that said, think about some contraindications. People who have pre-existing or predisposition to skin issues may be allergic to it. Coprinopsis adamantaria, as I mentioned earlier, is also known as inky cap, not shaggy inky cap, but it's also known as tripler's bane. And the cap is much shorter than this. It's gray to brown, and it's smooth, without scales. And it contains this mycotoxin called coprin. And that's also in other Coprinus genus, but however, they do not contain coprin. So Coprinus comatus is okay, and the chemical responsible, coprin, is a well-known chemical that is toxic in this mushroom, but it's only toxic when you ingest alcohol 3 days before or 3 days after, they've found. So the moral here is don't consume the Coprinopsis adamantaria when you have alcohol consumption there. This one is fine, and I've heard people say that they've eaten shaggy mane or inky caps with no ill effects. However, I highly suspect that they were eating shaggy mane and not inky cap. And you know, you just don't want to deal with those that sickness that it brings on, and it does have a lot of side effects. So just keep that in mind when out there gathering mushrooms, that you do have shaggy mane, and you'll be fine. So you can eat the inky cap, you just don't want to have alcohol. With that said, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and we're going to go ahead and look at this more closely, some single mushrooms growing back here, and I'll take you inside and we'll cut it open and look at it. So here we're seeing it's starting to deliquesce and produce this black inky substance, and it is beginning to curl up, and this will come up and droop, and these spores will be exposed in the bottom and either get carried away by wind or spread where they are. So this is the next stage of the shaggy mane. Stage of the shaggy mane, and auto-digest itself. So it's already done a lot of that, and this is kind of like the end. It's gonna finish digesting itself off here on the cap, and then it'll digest the stem and die back. It doesn't digest much of this. This kind of dies back. So that is the final stage of the 𝐂𝐻𝐿𝐵𝐻𝐿. So here is a cross section of 𝐂𝐻𝐿𝐵𝐻𝐿. So as I said, the stem does not touch the gills. It is hollow, as you can see. It's hollow inside, and it has these stringy filamentous kind of stem structure, which really crumbles very easily. And often you'll see like this one in here, it's beginning to develop. This is more of a young one, so it has a stringy structure in it. Alright, that about wraps it up on our video about 𝐂𝐻𝐿𝐵𝐻𝐿, shaggy mane. I hope you've enjoyed this video, so if you did, please give it a like, thumbs up, and until next time, you can follow me on Instagram, Brazilian Farmer Drew, or Sacred Herbs and Botanicals.
We might not see the outcomes, we might see the clues, but when you plant a seed, it's gotta grow before it blooms. Oh.